They say blood is thicker than water. But they never tell you what happens when that blood is spilled on your kitchen floor, pooling around your father's body while your brother stands over him, hands shaking, asking you a question that will define the rest of your life. Will you help me? I said yes. And I'd say it again. My name is Daniel. I'm 28 years old. I work as an accountant, I pay my taxes on time, I've never even gotten a speeding ticket. On paper, I'm the kind of person you'd trust to watch your kids or water your plants while you're on vacation. But 3 years ago, on a cold November night, I became an accomplice to murder. And the worst part? I don't regret it. This is that story. To understand what happened that night, you need to understand my father. Or rather, the man who called himself our father. Richard Coleman. To the outside world, he was a pillar of the community. A respected contractor who'd built half the houses in our small Pennsylvania town. The guy who showed up to church every Sunday, who sponsored the Little League team, who had a firm handshake and a booming laugh that echoed across the hardware store. Behind closed doors, he was a monster. I need you to understand something. This isn't one of those stories where I'm going to claim some dramatic, movie-style abuse. There were no cigarette burns, no broken bones that sent us to the hospital with carefully rehearsed lies. My father was smarter than that. He understood that visible damage raised questions, and Richard Coleman was very good at avoiding questions. His weapon of choice was fear. And he wielded it like an artist. The earliest memory I have of being truly afraid of him, I was 6 years old. My brother Marcus was 8. We'd been playing in the backyard, and I'd accidentally knocked over one of his tools, a level, I think. Just a cheap metal level that probably cost $15. It hit the concrete and the glass inside cracked. I remember the sound of the back door opening. The way the late afternoon sunlight seemed to dim. The sensation of my stomach dropping as his shadow fell over us. He didn't yell. That's what people never understand. He crouched down, picked up the level, examined it with the careful attention of a jeweler inspecting a diamond. Then he looked at me. Just looked at me. And in that look was every terrible thing he could do, every punishment he could devise, every way he could make me hurt without leaving a mark. You know what this means, he said quietly. I nodded, tears already streaming down my face. Good. Go to your room. I'll be up in an hour. That hour was worse than anything he actually did. My child's imagination conjured horrors far beyond his eventual punishment, which was to stand in the corner of my room, facing the wall, for 3 hours while he periodically checked on me, each visit a fresh spike of terror as I wondered if this time would be different. Marcus sat with me afterward, when Dad finally released me. He was crying too, though he tried to hide it. It's not fair, he whispered. It was an accident. Dad doesn't care about fair, I replied, with the grim wisdom of a 6-year-old who'd learned that lesson too many times already. That was the beginning of our shared understanding. Marcus and I against the world. Or more accurately, Marcus and I against our father. Our mother left when I was 9. People in town assumed she'd run off with another man. Small towns love that kind of gossip. The truth was simultaneously more simple and more devastating. She just couldn't take it anymore. I remember the morning she left. I'd come downstairs for breakfast and found a note on the kitchen table, written in her careful cursive on the back of a grocery receipt. I'm sorry. I can't do this anymore. Please forgive me. That was it. No, I love you. No, take care of each other. Just an apology and a request for forgiveness she probably knew she'd never receive. Dad found the note before Marcus woke up. He read it once, his jaw clenching tighter with each word, then he lit it on fire with his cigarette lighter and dropped it in the sink. We watched it burn together, neither of us speaking. Your mother was weak, he finally said, turning on the faucet to wash away the ashes. Weakness is a choice, Daniel. Remember that. You and your brother, you're not weak. I won't allow it. The irony of that statement would haunt me for years. He'd driven away the only buffer between us and his rage, and now he wanted to ensure we'd never have the strength to do the same. After Mom left, things got worse. Not dramatically worse, again, my father was too calculating for that, but incrementally, steadily worse. Like water rising in a locked room, slow enough that you keep thinking you can handle it, right up until you can't breathe anymore. The rules multiplied. Be home by 6. No friends over without permission. Homework done before dinner. Room spotless. Speak when spoken to. Never, ever talk back. Breaking these rules had consequences. Sometimes it was physical, a hard grip on the arm, a shove against a wall, once a slap across the face that left my ears ringing for an hour. But usually, it was psychological. The silent treatment that could last for days. The calm, measured explanations of our failures as human beings. The comparisons to our absent mother, the implication that we carried her weakness like a genetic curse. Marcus absorbed the worst of it. As the older brother, he felt responsible for protecting me. He'd take the blame for things I did, step between Dad and me when he sensed danger, deliberately draw fire to himself. I loved him for it. And I hated myself for letting him. By the time I was in high school, we'd both perfected the art of invisibility. We were good students. Not exceptional, which might have drawn attention, but solidly above average. We played sports, nothing too competitive, just enough to seem normal. We had friends, surface-level relationships that never went deep enough to require explanations about why we couldn't hang out after school or why we flinched at raised voices. We learned to read Dad's moods like meteorologists reading storm patterns. The set of his shoulders when he came home from work. The tone of his greeting. The way he held his beer bottle. These tiny signals would tell us whether we were in for a quiet evening or whether we needed to make ourselves scarce. Marcus graduated 2 years before me and got a job at a local garage. He was good with cars, patient with engines in a way he'd never been patient with people. I think he liked that machines followed logical rules, that if you understood the system, you could predict the outcome. Our father hated that Marcus didn't go to college. Hated that he worked with his hands like a common laborer, never mind that Dad himself was a contractor. There was a distinction in his mind, a hierarchy where Marcus had chosen the wrong rung. But Marcus didn't care. For the first time in his life, he had money that was his own, hours that belonged to him, a space outside Dad's immediate control. He got a small apartment across town. Nothing fancy, a studio above a pizza place that smelled perpetually of garlic and oregano, but it was his. He begged me to move in with him when I turned 18. I said no. God, I regret that now. Not because of what eventually happened, but because of the 2 years I wasted, the 2 years Marcus spent worrying about me, calling every night to make sure I was okay, showing up at the house on weekends with groceries or movie tickets or any excuse to check on me. You don't have to stay, he'd say, sitting in my room, keeping his voice low even though Dad was at work. You're 18 now. Legally, he can't stop you. I know, I'd reply. And I did know. But there was something about leaving that felt like admitting defeat. Like letting Dad win. If I ran away, if I abandoned the house, then he'd have successfully driven away every single person in his life, and he'd probably just tell himself we were all weak, just like Mom. I wanted him to face the truth, that we weren't weak. That we'd endured. That we'd survived him. Stupid, in retrospect. Survival isn't a trophy. It's just not being dead yet. I finally moved out 2 months before the incident. It wasn't a grand gesture, just a quiet transition. I'd saved money from my part-time job at the library, found a room for rent near my college campus, and one Saturday when Dad was at a job site, I loaded my stuff into Marcus's truck and left. I did leave a note. Unlike Mom, I felt I owed him that much. I'm moving out. I'll still come by on weekends to help with the yard. Thank you for the roof over my head. Daniel. Polite. Respectful. Completely devoid of actual feeling, which somehow felt more honest than pretending at emotions I didn't have. Dad called that night. I'd expected anger, maybe even threats. Instead, his voice was eerily calm. "You're making a mistake," he said. "The world's going to chew you up and spit you out. When it does, don't come crawling back here." "I won't," I said, and hung up. Marcus took me out for drinks that night. My first legal beer, celebrated 2 weeks after my 21st birthday. We sat in a dive bar on the edge of town, surrounded by people we didn't know, and for the first time in my life, I felt like I could breathe. "How does it feel?" Marcus asked, raising his bottle. "Like I've been underwater my whole life and someone finally pulled me up." He smiled, but it was sad around the edges. "I wish I'd pulled you up sooner." "You did your best," I said. "You always did." We clinked bottles, and in that moment, I genuinely believed the worst was behind us. We'd escaped. We'd made it out. The monster was trapped in his house, alone with his rules and his rage, and we were free. For 18 months, I was right. I should have known it couldn't last. The thing about abusers is that they can't stand losing control. And my father, he'd lost everyone. Mom had run. Marcus had moved out. I'd followed. He was alone in that big house he'd built with his own hands, surrounded by perfect walls and empty rooms, and somewhere in that silence, something in him snapped. Or maybe it had been broken all along, and we'd just been too close to see it. Marcus started noticing the calls first. Dad would phone him at work, asking strange questions. Where was he? Who was he with? Was he planning something? The paranoid interrogations of a man who couldn't accept that his sons had simply left. Then came the drive-bys. We'd see his truck parked across from Marcus's apartment, or idling outside my campus library. He never approached us, never even acknowledged us if we looked his way. Just sat there, watching, a silent reminder that he knew where we were, that we couldn't truly escape. "We should report him," I said to Marcus one evening, after I'd spotted Dad's truck for the 3rd time that week. "Get a restraining order or something." Marcus laughed, but there was no humor in it. "And tell them what? That our dad drives by sometimes? That he calls too much? They'll tell us we're overreacting. Small-town cops aren't going to hassle Richard Coleman because his adult sons have hurt feelings." He was right, of course. Dad's public image was too solid. Any complaint we made would be dismissed as exaggeration, misunderstanding, maybe even vindictive lies from ungrateful children. The escalation was gradual. First the calls, then the drive-bys, then the messages. He'd leave voicemails that started reasonable and ended with barely contained fury. He'd send texts in the middle of the night, Bible verses about honoring your father, interspersed with accusations of betrayal and weakness. Marcus handled it better than I did. He'd dealt with Dad's psychological warfare for years, he knew how to compartmentalize, to not let it burrow under his skin. But I'd only recently escaped. The freedom I'd tasted made the renewed harassment feel even more suffocating. Then, about 3 weeks before the incident, things took a darker turn. I came back to my apartment one evening to find the door unlocked. Not broken, unlocked, as if someone had used a key. Nothing was stolen, nothing was obviously disturbed, but small things were wrong. A book I'd left on the nightstand was on the desk. The bathroom door I always kept closed was open. My laptop, which I'd shut down, was in sleep mode. Someone had been inside. And I knew exactly who. I called Marcus immediately, trying to keep the panic out of my voice and failing completely. "He was in my apartment," I said, the words tumbling out. "Marcus, he was inside." "How did he?" "Locks are meaningless to him," Marcus interrupted, his voice grim. "You know that. He's been picking locks since we were kids. Remember how he'd check our rooms after bedtime?" I did remember. The violation of waking up to find him standing in the doorway, watching us sleep, ensuring we hadn't broken some arbitrary rule. "We need to do something," I said. This is stalking. This is breaking and entering. We can go to the police now. There was a long silence on the other end. Yeah, Marcus finally said. Yeah, maybe you're right. Come over tomorrow. We'll figure out what to say, how to make them take us seriously. I spent that night at Marcus's apartment, too afraid to stay in my own space. We stayed up late, documenting everything, the calls, the messages, the sightings, the break-in. Building a case that would force the police to act. Looking back, I wonder if Dad somehow knew what we were planning. If his surveillance had tipped him off. Because the next day, before we could make it to the police station, he made his move. November 16th. A Tuesday. The sky was the color of old bruises, heavy with the promise of snow that wouldn't fall for another week. I had an evening class that ran until 9 p.m., intermediate accounting, taught by a professor who spoke in a monotone that could put an insomniac to sleep. I'd texted Marcus during the break, confirming our plan to go to the police station first thing Wednesday morning. His reply was simple, yeah. Tomorrow we end this. Neither of us knew how prophetic those words would be. I got back to Marcus's apartment around 9:30. My car was in the shop, so I'd been crashing at his place for a few days. He'd given me a key, told me to come and go as I pleased, make myself at home. The normalcy of that gesture, the simple trust it implied, felt like a gift. I climbed the stairs to his studio, fumbling with the key in the dim hallway light. I could hear voices inside, Marcus's voice, and another one I couldn't quite place. For a moment, I thought he had a friend over, maybe a girl from the garage. Then I opened the door. And there was Dad. He was standing in the middle of the studio, his bulk seeming to fill the entire space. Marcus was backed against the kitchenette counter, his posture defensive, hands raised slightly as if to ward off a blow. The air felt electric, charged with the kind of tension that precedes violence. Daniel, Dad said, turning to face me. His voice was calm. Too calm. Good. Now we're all here. We can have a family discussion. I didn't move from the doorway. Every instinct screamed at me to run, but I couldn't leave Marcus alone with him. How did you get in? I asked, though I already knew the answer. Dad smiled, a terrible expression that didn't reach his eyes. I built half this town, son. You think I don't know how to get past a standard deadbolt? He turned back to Marcus. We were just discussing respect. About what children owe their father. We're not children anymore, Marcus said, his voice steady despite the fear I could see in his eyes. And you're not welcome here. Get out. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Dad took a step toward Marcus. Then another. His movements were deliberate, almost leisurely, like a predator that knows its prey has nowhere to run. Not welcome, he repeated softly. In a building I helped finance with my tax dollars? In a town I helped build? You exist because of me. This place exists because of me. Everything you have, everything you are, comes from me. That's not true, I heard myself say. My voice sounded distant, like it belonged to someone else. We built ourselves. Despite you. Dad's head swiveled toward me with reptilian precision. Despite me? You ungrateful little, he stopped himself, visibly forcing control. When he spoke again, his voice had returned to that dangerous calm. I gave you everything. A roof over your heads. Food on the table. I worked 60-hour weeks to provide for you, and this is how you repay me? By sneaking away in the night? By turning your backs on your own father? You didn't give us anything but fear, Marcus said. Every day of our lives, we were terrified of you. That's not love. That's not family. That's prison. I saw Dad's hand clench into a fist. Saw the muscle in his jaw twitch. And I knew, with absolute certainty, that we'd crossed a line we couldn't uncross. Prison? Dad's voice had gone soft again, which was always worse than his yelling. You think you know what prison is? You think having rules and discipline is prison? I should show you what real suffering looks like. What real pain feels like. He moved toward Marcus again, and this time Marcus didn't back away. Touch me, Marcus said, and I'm pressing charges. I don't care who you are in this town. I don't care what people think. You lay one finger on me, and I'm going to the police. The police. Dad actually laughed. You think Chief Morrison is going to believe you over me? You think anyone in this town is going to take your word against mine? We have evidence, I said, pulling out my phone. Every call, every message, the break-in. It's all documented. Dad's expression shifted. For the first time, I saw something like uncertainty flicker across his face. Then it hardened into rage. You've been building a case against me? His voice rose, the careful control finally cracking. Your own father? What kind of twisted, ungrateful? The kind who's tired of being afraid, Marcus interrupted. We're done, Dad. This ends tonight. Either you leave and never contact us again, or we go to the police tomorrow and tell them everything. The silence that followed was suffocating. Dad stood there, trembling with fury, and I could see him calculating. Weighing his options. Deciding how far he could push before consequences became unavoidable. Then he made his choice. He lunged at Marcus. It happened so fast. One moment Dad was standing there, and the next he'd crossed the space between them, his hands reaching for Marcus's throat. Marcus tried to dodge, but the kitchenette was small, cramped, offering no room to maneuver. They crashed against the counter. I heard the sound of glass breaking, a dish tumbling from the drying rack. Dad's hands found Marcus's neck, and Marcus's eyes went wide. I moved without thinking. There was a heavy skillet on the stove. Cast iron, the kind that weighs 3 pounds empty. I grabbed it and swung with all my strength, aiming for Dad's shoulder, trying to knock him off Marcus. The skillet connected with the side of his head instead. The sound was horrible. Wet and hollow at the same time, like a melon cracking. Dad staggered sideways, his grip on Marcus releasing. He turned toward me, his expression almost comical in its surprise, as if he couldn't quite believe what had just happened. Blood was trickling down the side of his face from where the skillet had split his scalp. He started to say. Then Marcus hit him. I don't even think it was conscious. Marcus had been choking, oxygen-deprived, operating on pure survival instinct. His fist caught Dad in the temple, right where I'd hit him with the skillet. Dad went down hard, his head bouncing off the edge of the counter with another sickening crack. He didn't get back up. Time did something strange in the aftermath. It simultaneously stretched and compressed, each second feeling like an hour while entire minutes vanished into blank nothing. Marcus and I stood there, breathing hard, staring at Dad's motionless form on the kitchen floor. Blood was pooling beneath his head, spreading across the cheap linoleum in a dark stain that seemed to grow impossibly fast. I couldn't finish the sentence. Marcus knelt down, pressed 2 fingers to Dad's neck. His hand was shaking. After a moment that felt like forever, he looked up at me. No pulse. The words didn't seem real. They hung in the air between us, nonsensical, impossible. Check again, I said. You have to check again. Marcus did, this time pressing harder, moving his fingers to different positions. Checking for breath. Putting his ear to Dad's chest. Daniel, he said quietly. He's dead. I felt my legs give out. I sat down hard on the floor, the impact jarring my spine, but the physical pain was distant, unimportant compared to the realization crashing over me. We'd killed him. Our father was dead on Marcus's kitchen floor, and we'd killed him. It was self-defense, I heard myself saying. He attacked you. He was choking you. Anyone could see. Could they? Marcus interrupted, his voice strange and hollow. Think about it, Daniel. Really think about it. What do they see? A respected community member, dead in his son's apartment. 2 adult men, both younger and stronger than him. Our history of accusations against him that no one believed. But the evidence, I protested. The calls, the messages. Harassment at worst. Not enough to justify this. Marcus gestured at Dad's body. And who's going to believe he attacked first? He's Richard Coleman. We're just his sons who couldn't handle discipline. The terrible logic of it settled over me like a shroud. In death, Dad's public image would become his shield. The town would close ranks around his memory, and Marcus and I would be transformed from victims into murderers. What do we do? I whispered. Marcus sat back against the cabinet, his eyes fixed on Dad's body. When he finally spoke, his voice was eerily calm. We have 2 choices. 1. We call the police right now, tell them the truth, and hope a jury believes us over a dead man's reputation. 2. He didn't finish, but he didn't need to. That's insane, I said. We can't just, Marcus, we're not criminals. We can't hide a body. People will notice he's missing. Will they? Marcus met my eyes. Think about it. Dad was a loner. Mom's gone. We're his only family, and everyone knows we're estranged. His crew at work is used to him taking off for days at a time on job sites. How long before anyone actually reports him missing? Someone will figure it out eventually, I insisted, but even as I said it, I wasn't sure. Maybe, Marcus admitted. But by then, there won't be any evidence connecting us. No body in my apartment. No blood. No witnesses. It'll be like he just vanished. I stared at my brother, trying to reconcile this calculating stranger with the person I'd known my entire life. But maybe this was who he'd always been. Maybe you don't survive the kind of father we had without learning to think strategically, to compartmentalize, to do whatever it takes to survive. I'm not asking you to help, Marcus continued. This is my apartment. My responsibility. You can walk out right now, go home, and tomorrow when I tell you Dad came by and we had a fight but he left, you'll believe me because you weren't here to see anything different. He was giving me an out. A chance to stay clean, to not become complicit in what would come next. I should have taken it. Where would we even? I stopped myself, realizing that by asking the question, I'd already made my choice. How would we? Dad's building a house out past Miller's Creek, Marcus said. Foundations poured, framings up, but they haven't done the basement floor yet. Just gravel and dirt. We put him in there, pour the concrete like normal, and he's gone forever. The detail of his plan terrified me. This wasn't something he'd come up with in the last 5 minutes. This was a contingency he'd been considering, maybe unconsciously, for a long time. You've thought about this, I said. Of course I have. Marcus's laugh was bitter. You think I haven't had revenge fantasies? That I haven't imagined what it would be like if he just disappeared? I never planned to act on them. But now, he looked at Dad's body. Now it's not a fantasy anymore. I should have said no. I should have insisted we call the police, face the consequences, trust the system to see the truth. But I looked at Dad's body, and all I could think about was how he'd made us feel small and afraid every single day of our lives. How he'd driven Mom away. How he'd stalked us even after we escaped. How his hands had been around Marcus's throat minutes ago, how he'd been willing to kill his own son rather than let go of control. And I thought about how the town would react to his death. The funeral they'd throw, the kind words they'd say, the legacy they'd preserve. Richard Coleman, pillar of the community. Richard Coleman, devoted father. Richard Coleman, tragic victim. They'd never know the truth. And Marcus and I would go to prison for the crime of defending ourselves. Tell me what to do, I said. Marcus moved with a purpose that frightened me. He stood up, stepped over Dad's body like it was just another obstacle, and started going through his apartment with systematic efficiency. We need to clean this up first, he said, his voice steady. Every drop of blood. Every piece of evidence. Then we wrap him in something waterproof. I've got tarps in the truck. We wait until after midnight, load him up, and drive out to Miller's Creek. I watched him move around the apartment, this person who looked like my brother but seemed to have transformed into someone else entirely. Someone capable. Someone cold. Marcus, I said. Are you okay? He stopped, his back to me, shoulders tense. For a long moment, he didn't respond. When he finally turned around, his eyes were wet. No, he said simply. But I will be. We will be. Once this is over. And that was the thing that broke through my shock, the certainty in his voice. The promise that on the other side of this nightmare, we'd still have each other. That we'd survived this like we'd survived everything else. I stood up. My legs were steadier now. Okay. Tell me what to do. The next 3 hours exist in my memory as a series of disconnected snapshots, each one seared into my brain with horrifying clarity. Snapshot 1, Marcus pouring bleach over the blood while I held a flashlight. The chemical smell burning my nostrils. The way the blood seemed to resist at first, clinging to the linoleum before finally surrendering to the bleach's corrosive power. Snapshot 2, rolling Dad's body onto a blue plastic tarp. He was heavy, heavier than I'd expected. Dead weight, my brain supplied helpfully, and I almost laughed at the terrible appropriateness of the phrase. His eyes were half open, clouded and unseeing. I closed them with trembling fingers, a gesture that felt both respectful and absurd given what we were doing. Snapshot 3, Marcus duct taping the tarp closed while I scrubbed the counter where Dad's head had hit. There was a small dent in the laminate, a permanent reminder of the impact. Marcus saw me staring at it. I'll replace the counter tomorrow, he said. Tell the landlord I dropped something heavy. The casual lie, the forward planning, it all felt surreal. Snapshot 4, sitting in Marcus's darkened apartment at 11:47 p.m., waiting for midnight. We'd turned off all the lights, drawn all the curtains. The tarp-wrapped body lay in the kitchenette, and we sat in the living area, not speaking, just listening to the sounds of the building settling around us. Somewhere below, someone was watching TV. Canned laughter filtered up through the floor, obscene in its normalcy. Do you think he knew? I asked suddenly. At the end. Do you think he realized we'd finally fought back? Marcus was quiet for a long time. I hope so, he finally said. I hope in that last second, he understood that we weren't weak. That we never were. Snapshot 5, 12:17 a.m. The building was quiet. We carried Dad's body down the back stairs, moving slowly, pausing at every creak. Marcus's truck was parked in the alley behind the building, backed up as close to the door as possible. We loaded the tarp into the truck bed, covered it with construction supplies and tools. To anyone passing by, it would look like Marcus was hauling equipment to a job site. Which, in a terrible way, he was. The drive out to Miller's Creek took 40 minutes. We took back roads, avoiding main streets and traffic lights. Marcus drove carefully, 5 miles under the speed limit, using his turn signals, stopping completely at every stop sign. One traffic violation, one random police check, and everything would unravel. I kept my hands clenched in my lap, trying to stop them from shaking. Every pair of headlights behind us felt like pursuit. Every passing car felt like a witness. Breathe, Marcus said quietly. You're holding your breath. I realized he was right. I forced myself to inhale, exhale. The air in the truck smelled like motor oil and fear. The construction site was exactly as Marcus had described it, a skeletal house frame rising against the dark sky, the basement excavation a black pit in the earth. Marcus had been working on this property for months, he knew every detail of the construction schedule. They're pouring the basement floor Thursday morning, he'd explained back at the apartment. Dad was supposed to supervise, but obviously he won't be there. His crew will assume he's running late or dealing with another job. By the time anyone thinks to look for him, he'll be under 3 inches of concrete. We parked the truck behind a cluster of trees, out of sight from the road. The site was dark, silent except for the sound of wind rustling through bare branches and the distant hoot of an owl. Marcus grabbed a shovel from the truck bed. We need to dig down about 4 feet in the northeast corner. That's where the floor will be thickest. They're reinforcing it for a support column. I took the second shovel without a word. Digging a grave for your father is not something they prepare you for in life. No one tells you how the earth resists the shovel at first, how your hands will blister within minutes, how your back will scream in protest. No one mentions the sound of dirt hitting dirt, the way shadows play tricks on you in the darkness, making you see movement where there is none. We dug in silence, the only sounds our labored breathing and the scrape of metal against soil. The hole grew slowly, 2 feet, 3 feet, 4 feet. My muscles burned. Sweat soaked through my shirt despite the cold November air. Marcus worked like a machine, methodical and tireless. I wondered if he was thinking about anything at all, or if he'd managed to compartmentalize completely, to reduce this to just another task to be completed. That's deep enough, he finally said. We climbed out of the hole, our clothes caked with dirt. Together, we dragged the tarp-wrapped body to the edge of the excavation. This was it. The point of no return. Once we put him in that hole, once we covered him with earth, we could never take it back. We could never claim it was an accident, never argue self-defense with a body on the scene as evidence. We'd be murderers. Criminals. Men who'd killed their father and hidden his corpse like cowards. Daniel. Marcus's voice cut through my spiraling thoughts. We can still call the police. Right now. We can say we panicked, that we didn't know what to do. It'll be harder to prove self-defense, but it's not impossible. I looked at him, really looked at him. My brother. My protector. The person who'd stood between me and Dad's rage for most of my life. Who'd taken punishments meant for me. Who'd suffered so I wouldn't have to. No, I said. We finish this. Together. We pushed the body into the hole. It landed with a heavy thud that seemed too loud, too final. I stared down at the blue tarp, barely visible in the darkness of the pit, and felt something inside me crack. I'd killed my father. And now I was burying him in an unmarked grave. The magnitude of it hit me all at once. My knees buckled, and I fell forward, my hands catching me at the edge of the hole. A sound came out of me, something between a sob and a scream, raw and animal. Marcus's arms wrapped around me from behind, pulling me back from the edge. He held me while I broke apart, while 28 years of fear and rage and grief poured out of me in gasping, ugly cries. I know, he kept saying. I know. I know. I don't know how long we stayed like that. Eventually, the sobs subsided. I wiped my face with dirty hands, smearing mud across my cheeks. I'm sorry, I said. Don't be. Marcus handed me my shovel. But we need to finish. Before sunrise. We filled in the hole. Each shovelful of dirt felt like a choice, a commitment to the lie we'd decided to live. With every scoop, we buried not just Dad's body but the truth of what had happened, the reality of who we were, the possibility of absolution. By the time we finished, the sky was beginning to lighten in the east, not quite dawn, but the promise of it. We'd packed the earth down, scattered loose gravel over the disturbed ground, done everything we could to make it look undisturbed. Marcus surveyed our work with a critical eye. It'll work, he said finally. The crew will never notice. They'll dig out a few more inches for leveling, add the rebar grid, and pour the concrete right over him. We loaded the shovels back into the truck. Marcus gathered the tarp scraps we'd cut away, stuffed them into a garbage bag. Evidence to be disposed of elsewhere. As we drove away from Miller's Creek, the sun broke over the horizon. Golden light flooded across the Pennsylvania landscape, illuminating farmland and forest, making everything look clean and new and innocent. I wanted to tell Marcus that I felt different somehow. That committing murder and hiding the body had fundamentally changed me, marked me as something other than human. But the truth was, I felt exactly the same. Maybe that was the most terrifying part. The next few days were a masterclass in sustained deception. Marcus called Dad's office Wednesday morning, asked to speak to Richard Coleman. The secretary said he hadn't come in. Marcus played it casual. "Oh, he's probably on a job site. If you hear from him, tell him to call me." Thursday, the basement floor was poured at Miller's Creek. Marcus was there, supervising like Dad had asked him 2 weeks ago. The crew thought nothing of it. Richard was known for delegating at the last minute. Friday, the secretary called Marcus back. "Your father hasn't been in all week." His phone goes straight to voicemail. "Is everything okay?" "I haven't heard from him either," Marcus said, injecting just the right amount of concern into his voice. "That's weird. He usually checks in." By Saturday, the police were involved. Officer Bradley showed up at Marcus's apartment, the same apartment where we'd killed Dad 5 days earlier. Marcus had replaced the counter, scrubbed every surface with bleach, replaced the dish mat where blood had soaked through. The apartment looked completely normal. "Your father's been reported missing," Bradley said, his tone sympathetic. "His secretary says he hasn't been to work. We checked his house, hasn't been there either. His truck's missing. You have any idea where he might be?" "No," Marcus said honestly. "We're not that close. Haven't been for a while." "Any particular reason for that?" Marcus shrugged. "Family stuff. Nothing dramatic. We just grew apart." Bradley made notes. Asked a few more questions. When was the last time Marcus had seen Dad? 2 weeks ago, at the hardware store. A lie. Had there been any arguments? No more than usual, technically true. Did Marcus know anyone who might want to hurt his father? No, a lie by omission, since the person who'd wanted to hurt Dad was now dead. The interview lasted maybe 20 minutes. Bradley seemed satisfied with the answers. As he was leaving, he turned back to Marcus. "Your father's a tough guy," he said. "Probably just needed to clear his head, drove off somewhere. He'll turn up." Marcus nodded. "I hope so." After Bradley left, Marcus called me. "Police came by," he said, his voice carefully neutral in case anyone was listening. "They're looking for Dad. Just wanted to give you a heads up in case they contact you too." "Thanks," I said, matching his tone. "Let me know if you hear anything." We hung up. 2 brothers, concerned about their missing father. Playing our parts perfectly. The investigation into Richard Coleman's disappearance was, in retrospect, shockingly brief. Police found his truck 3 weeks later, abandoned in a Walmart parking lot 200 miles away. The keys were in the ignition. His wallet was in the glove compartment, cash and credit cards untouched. It looked like he'd simply walked away from his own life. The prevailing theory became that Dad had experienced some kind of mental health crisis. The stress of running a business, the loneliness of living alone, the estrangement from his sons. It had all become too much, and he'd decided to disappear. Maybe start over somewhere else. Maybe something worse. A search was conducted. Alerts were sent out. Dad's picture appeared on local news broadcasts, accompanied by grave voiceovers asking if anyone had seen this man. No one had. Because he was under 6 inches of concrete in a house basement, with a family already living in the home above him. By the time the foundation was finished, the framing completed, and the house sold, Dad had been missing for 8 months. The case went cold. Not closed, missing persons cases never really close, but cold enough that the police stopped actively investigating. Life went on. Marcus continued working at the garage. I finished my accounting degree. We saw each other regularly, had dinners together, talked about normal things, work, sports, the weather. We never talked about that November night. Not because we'd forgotten, but because there was nothing left to say. People always ask what it's like to get away with murder. They expect some dramatic answer, nightmares every night, overwhelming guilt, the constant fear of discovery. The truth is more mundane and, in some ways, more disturbing. I don't have nightmares. I sleep fine. Some mornings, I wake up and don't think about what we did until I'm halfway through my coffee, and then it hits me, oh right, I killed my father. Like remembering I have a dentist appointment or need to buy groceries. The guilt comes and goes. Some days, I'm convinced we did the only thing we could have done. Self-defense isn't just physical, it's psychological, spiritual. We defended ourselves against a lifetime of abuse, and if the law couldn't understand that, couldn't protect us, then we had to protect ourselves. Other days, I'm horrified by what we did. Not the killing itself, I can still justify that as self-defense, but the hiding. The lies. The cold calculation that went into making Dad disappear. That wasn't survival. That was something else. Something darker. As for the fear of discovery, it's always there, a low hum in the background of my life. Every police siren makes my heart rate spike. Every unexpected phone call could be the one that unravels everything. I've played out the scenario 1,000 times, what I'd say, how I'd handle it, whether I'd tell the truth or maintain the lie to the end. But 3 years have passed, and no one's come knocking. The house at Miller's Creek has changed hands twice. The family living there now has no idea that there's a body under their basement floor. Why would they? It's just another house in a small Pennsylvania town, built by Richard Coleman's crew, a monument to his legacy. The irony isn't lost on me. Marcus and I have talked about it exactly once since that night. It was about a year ago. We were at his apartment. He still lives in the same place, though he did eventually replace all the flooring, and we'd had a few beers. More than a few, if I'm being honest. Do you ever regret it? I asked suddenly. Marcus knew immediately what I meant. He was quiet for a long time, staring at his beer bottle, picking at the label. I regret that it happened, he finally said. I regret that he forced us into that situation. I regret that the world is set up in a way that made hiding his body seem like the logical choice. He looked up at me. But do I regret protecting us? Protecting you? No. I'd do it again. Even knowing what it would cost? I asked. What did it cost, Daniel? His voice was soft but intense. Our innocence? We lost that a long time ago. Our peace of mind? We never had it in the first place. Our father? He died years before we put him in the ground. The moment he chose fear and control over love. I wanted to argue with him, to say that we'd still lost something irretrievable. But looking at my brother, I realized he was right. We'd simply formalized what had already been true, our father was gone, and we were free. I love you, I said instead. Marcus smiled, sad and knowing. I love you too. That's why we're in this together. Always have been. So that's the story. That's what happened on November 16th, 3 years ago, and in the days that followed. I've thought a lot about why I'm telling you this now. Anonymous confession on the internet, is it courage or cowardice? Atonement or self-indulgence? Maybe it's just a need to speak the truth out loud, even if it's to strangers who'll never know my real name or face. For 3 years, I've carried this secret like a stone in my chest. Every conversation with friends, every interaction with colleagues, every moment of normal life has been shadowed by the knowledge of what I've done. And maybe that's my punishment. Not prison, not legal consequences, but this, living a normal life while knowing I'm not normal. Laughing at jokes while remembering what my hands have done. Making small talk about the weather while thinking about how cold the earth was that November night. I've read that some murderers are haunted by their victims. That they see faces in crowds, hear voices in empty rooms, feel the weight of guilt crushing them slowly. I don't see Dad. I don't hear him. The only weight I carry is the knowledge that I'm capable of things I never thought I could do. That when pushed far enough, when defending someone I love, I can kill without hesitation and hide the evidence without falling apart. Is that evil? Or is it just human? I don't know. I genuinely don't know. What I do know is this: my brother and I survived our father. We survived his abuse, his control, his attempts to break us. We survived his death and the aftermath. We survived becoming the kind of people who could do what we did. And we're still here. Still brothers. Still fighting to build lives that aren't defined by fear. Dad wanted us to be weak. Wanted us to believe we'd never escape him. Wanted us to carry his poison forever. But we didn't. We don't. We buried him under concrete and moved on with our lives. And if that makes us monsters, so be it. We're monsters who chose each other over a system that would have punished us for the crime of self-defense. I said at the beginning that I don't regret what we did. That's not entirely true. I regret that we had to do it. I regret that Dad's abuse pushed us to that point. I regret that the world is set up in a way where two scared young men couldn't trust the system to protect them from their abuser. But do I regret protecting my brother? Regret surviving? Regret choosing freedom over continued victimhood? No. Not for a second. And I'd do it again. 3 years later, Marcus and I are doing okay. Better than okay, actually. Marcus is still at the garage, but he's moved up, assistant manager now. He's dating someone, a teacher named Sarah, who makes him laugh in a way I've never seen before. She doesn't know about Dad, of course. No one does. But she knows Marcus is a good man, and that's enough. I finished my degree, got my CPA license, and now work at a small firm downtown. I've got my own apartment, a real one-bedroom this time, not a rented room. I've even started seeing someone, Jennifer, a librarian I met at the coffee shop near my office. She asked me about my family once, and I told her the truth. My mom left when I was young, and my dad disappeared a few years ago. Presumed dead, but no body was ever found. She held my hand and told me she was sorry for my loss. I thanked her and meant it. Because I did lose something, even if it wasn't what she thought. I lost the version of myself who believed that justice always prevails, that the system protects the vulnerable, that good people don't do terrible things. But I gained something too, the certainty that I can protect the people I love, no matter the cost. The knowledge that I'm stronger than I thought. The freedom from fear that had defined my entire life. Last week, I drove past the house at Miller's Creek. Just drove past, I didn't stop, didn't even slow down much. But I saw it, a cheerful two-story with blue shutters, a swing set in the backyard, Halloween decorations still up on the porch even though it's almost Thanksgiving. A family lives there. They have no idea that the foundation of their happy home was built on our darkest secret. And you know what? I hope they never find out. I hope they live there for 50 years, raise their kids, grow old, and never once suspect what's beneath their feet. Because they deserve a normal life. A happy life. Just like Marcus and I deserved one. And finally, 3 years after that November night, I think we're starting to build it. So that's my confession. My truth. The thing I can never tell anyone who knows my real name. I killed my father. Or rather, my brother and I killed him together, in a moment of desperate self-defense that spiraled into premeditated cover-up. We hid his body, lied to the police, and got away with it. The law would say we're murderers. The therapist I'll probably never see would say we're trauma survivors who made an impossible choice under extreme duress. I say we're just two brothers who refuse to be victims anymore. Make of that what you will. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm not asking for understanding. I'm not even sure I'm asking for anything at all, except maybe to be heard. To have someone, somewhere, know the truth even if they'll never know it's me. Because the hardest part of getting away with murder isn't the fear of being caught. It's living with the knowledge that you could. That you did. That you'd do it again if you had to. And somehow finding a way to be okay with that. 3 years later, I'm still working on the okay part. But I'm getting there. We both are. And Dad, well, Dad's exactly where he deserves to be. Under the foundation of a house built on his own legacy, crushed under the weight of concrete and lies, forgotten by everyone except the 2 people he tried hardest to break. We survived him. In the end, that's all that matters.